Come with us on a journey to a place where information is unlocked, knowledge is gained, and the exchange of experiences welcome. This is the Knowledge Exchange, presented by Lakeland Community College.
And good afternoon, Lakeland community. My name is Josie Vano. I'm the president of Lakeland's chapter of Phi Theta Kappa. We are the organization hosting today's event. For accessibility purposes, I'm a white woman with dark hair and white-rimmed glasses, wearing a pink shirt, a black blazer, and sitting in front of a gray wall. So why did I just describe myself, and who's over there in the black shirt with the flying hands? We're here today to talk about accessibility, which is defined by Oxford as the quality of being easily reached, entered, or used by people who have a disability. Now, most of us think of accessibility as wheelchair ramps and parking spaces, but it's more than that. I give my physical description for attendees who may be blind or have low vision, and we have a sign language interpreter for attendees who may be deaf or are hard of hearing language users. Sign language users. In the United States alone, there are 61 million adults living with disability, according to the CDC. That's over a quarter of the country's population. We began to really talk about accessibility as a nation 30 years ago with the passing of a law known as the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. This law mandated that places like hospitals, schools, public transport, and businesses make their facilities accessible to people with disabilities, and made it illegal to discriminate on the basis of disability. But at that time, disability wasn't really understood by most Americans. In our research, we found that many negative perceptions and stereotypes have been held about people with disabilities for decades, which caused many businesses to push back against the law or to comply in substandard ways, a practice which continues even now, 30 years later. The passing of the ADA didn't eliminate these stereotypes or the discrimination against people with disabilities called ableism, any more than civil rights legislation eliminated racism. The good news is, those perceptions of people with disabilities have been changing steadily over the last 30 years. Disabled people are gaining more representation in the media, and more accurate representation at that. More conversations are being had about what ableism is and how to combat it. And most importantly, we're beginning to listen to people with disabilities and learn from their actual lived experience, rather than deferring solely to medical research or the words of their caregivers. One of the most effective ways to combat misperception is education, and that's why we're here today. At the end of the panel, we'll be sending out a brief survey to attendees to allow you to share your thoughts with us or anything you might have learned. This will help PTK with our Honors in Action research project, and we appreciate you taking a few minutes to respond. So look out in your email for that link after the panel's over. I'm joined today by Lakeland students, Elizabeth Brissell, Maggie Barkut, as well as occupational therapy assistant Jennifer Lee. Thank you all for being here today. As I address each of you, please provide a physical description in your introduction. So we're going to start with Elizabeth and Maggie. Elizabeth, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Elizabeth, you are still muted, my dear.
Spring, and I'm getting my bachelor's in social work from the Youngstown State University. I have cerebral palsy, which is a neurological disorder. It specifically affects, I have quadriplegic cerebral palsy. I'm not exactly like everyone who has cerebral palsy, but they are also not exactly like me, although we may have many things in common. You're into that. Being a quadriplegic for me means I need to rely on others for help, but I'm still able to go to school because I have the cognitive function. I do have to use a wheelchair to get around, and I have an assistant that helps me with my physical daily functions. I have other health issues as a result, but the bottom line is I don't let my disability define who I am.
Great, thank you. Maggie, can you introduce yourself for our attendees?
Hello, my name is Maggie. I'm a white woman with medium length brown hair. I go to Lakeland and Riverside High School right now, and I've been a CCP student at Lakeland for 2 years. I have ADHD, which is a learning disability, and I have a 504 plan to help me be able to function normally throughout school.
And
And
Maggie, oh,
yeah.
sorry.
And I plan on becoming an engineer once I am done with school.
Very cool. Engineering is really fascinating. Maggie, for our attendees who might not know, can you explain what a 504 is?
Yeah, it's like a plan with certain like guidelines for teachers on how to help me with things I struggle with, such as focusing or timelines.
Great, thank you. So Jennifer, we're going to turn to you. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us what it means to be an OT assistant, an occupational therapy assistant? Like what is it that you do and who do you work with primarily?
So I am a white female with medium brown hair, and I am in a black blazer with a white wall behind me. As an occupational therapy assistant, I do work under an occupational therapist, and I have the ability to teach individuals how to overcome challenges of performing daily activities because of their illness, disability, or a new injury. So right now I actually work as an instructor at Lakeland, and I'm an instructor in the occupational therapy assistant program. So right now I teach my students how to identify those challenges, how to advocate for their clients, and also, how to, speak with clients and other people that don't necessarily understand what our clients need.
Great. I'm so glad you're here today. We're going to need all of that knowledge you have. So before you became an occupational therapy assistant, did you have any perceptions about people with disabilities? What was your experience?
So before I became an occupational therapy assistant, I actually substitute taught at a couple of our area school districts. And I kind of already knew that I wanted to become an occupational therapy assistant. So I tried to always substitute teach in some of the multiple disability rooms or some of our other special ed rooms in our area districts. So I already kind of had experience with individuals with disabilities, mostly cognitive and some physical disabilities before I became an occupational therapy assistant.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Elizabeth and Maggie, and we're still kind of talking about perceptions of disability. So Elizabeth, what are some of the perceptions you've noticed that people hold about you, and how has that affected the way that they treat you?
Often people perceive me as incapable, childlike. This is not uncommon, and unfortunately, it's also not uncommon for them to pat me on the head. Sometimes people treat me like I will break, like I'm fragile. Sometimes they even treat me like I don't even exist and I'm not in the room. I will also get the sympathetic responses of people feeling sorry for me. That's the worst way I feel treated sometimes. It makes me feel small and invisible and sometimes worthless.
Yeah, we do see that a lot with certain physical disabilities, and it's really unfortunate because, like you've said, you have the cognitive capacity to go to college. You're not a child, and people do treat you that way sometimes. Maggie, what are some perceptions that you've noticed people hold about you, and how has that affected how they treat you?
So there's a lot of people who assume that they know everything about ADHD, and sometimes I will have people who think that they know what's best for me better than I do. And it's mostly teachers where they'll get very caught up on one thing that I need to help me, when in reality they should be focusing on something else. So I just sometimes wish that I feel like it'd be better if people listen to what I have to say instead of what they've heard from others.
So you've kind of touched on this a bit. What do you wish people knew about you or about your experience?
I wish that people knew that not everyone has the exact same experience, and that just because it works for one other person, it doesn't mean it'll work for me. And it's important that they listen to what I have to say instead of what someone standing next to me has to say.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth, same question. What do you wish people knew about you or your experience?
I wish people knew that we can make our own choices, that we have the freedom to do what we want when we want. I also wish that we could also have friendships like everyone else, have a normal life and try to fit in.
Thank you. In a few minutes, we're going to open up the chat for questions. So if you have any questions for our panelists, go ahead and start dropping those in the chat. And in a few minutes, we will start to address some of those. Please make sure you identify the panelist who you'd like to ask the question, or let us know if it's more a question in general. Jennifer, we're going to come back to you. As a provider for people with disabilities, what do you wish disabled people knew about disabled people?
I wish that they would know that it is more about empathy than it is about sympathy. Kind of like Elizabeth just explained, if people actually took the time to get to know her and find out what she likes and what she likes to do in her free time and the TV shows she watches and the music that she loves, they would understand that the disability is only on the surface most of the time, and that everyone is the same and we all have kind of the same common goals, same common interests. And that's kind of what I wish people would really know and take with them, even if that's the only thing they take with today. We are all the same and we all have the same types of interests.
Yeah, that's interesting because also what I'm hearing a lot of is I'm not defined by my disability and I'm an individual. You can't really categorize me based on your experience with other people. So great. Elizabeth, in a presentation for a previous class, you mentioned that some able-bodied people will ignore people with disabilities because disability makes them uncomfortable. They don't know how to approach a person with a disability, or they may be afraid of saying maybe the wrong thing. What would you say to those people, or what advice would you give them for approaching a person with a disability?
The reality is meeting someone with a disability is the same as meeting anyone else. We want the same things. We want for people to love and understand us. We want the people to take time to get to know us and to find out that we have much more in common. We want friendships like everyone else. Advocate Ross Howard Casey focused on 7 specific guidelines for people with disabilities. 1, offering a hand in friendship. Even though I may not be able to give you a handshake, it's not rude of you to offer it. 2, speak directly at us, not to the person next to me, to me as a person. 3, speak to me like you would any other adult. 4, avoid leaning on the wheelchair. It's an extension of my body. 5, listen attentively, especially if a person has difficulty speaking. Sometimes people with disabilities may have a hard time speaking, and I may have to repeat myself several times if you don't understand something I am saying. 6, if you need to talk about their disability, refer to them as a person with a disability, not as a person that has the disability. We are people first. We should be treated like the and the highlights of the disability, like relax, leaves them up because our language is full of sayings that aren't meant to be taken literally. For example, let's just run over to Breakers and get a bite to eat. It's obviously said not to be offensive, but it's a figure of speech. We understand that these phrases are not meant to insult us. In fact, we probably use them ourselves. The most important thing to remember when speaking to someone with a disability is to treat them like you would want to be treated. Respect goes a long way.
Great, Elizabeth, thank you. I'm so glad you shared that. It's a very thorough list, and I think it covers a lot of the questions that non-disabled people have. So Maggie or Jennifer, do you have anything to add to that? What advice would you give to able-bodied people who are maybe hesitant to approach someone with disabilities? Maggie, we'll start with you.
Like Elizabeth said, you should just treat them like a normal person, because in most ways, other than like, they are just a normal person who wants to have relationships. And it is important to just be patient with people, because with me, my big problem is when I'm talking to people, it's very hard for me to understand what they're saying. And sometimes people get annoyed when I ask them to repeat themselves a lot. But the people who are okay with that and sometimes just slow down their speaking, it really helps me. So it's just listen to what the person you're talking to is asking you to do and treat them with respect.
Thank you, Maggie. Jennifer?
I think Elizabeth's 7 strategies really hit the nail on the head. It's making eye contact, treating people with respect, and giving someone what you would like to give, like what you would like to receive. When someone communicates with me, what do they want me to do, to give back? So I think it's really, what are you seeking? And that's what you should be giving.
Great, thanks so much. At this time, we're going to invite some questions from our audience. Crystal, if there's any questions in the chat, could you read those out for us and give our panelists an opportunity to respond?
Of course. So our first question is from Dr. Musiel. This is directed towards Maggie or Elizabeth. The question is, have either of you traveled outside of the U.S.? And how has your accessibility needs been met or treated the same or differently than here in the U.S.?
I guess I'll go ahead, Mary. And I will say their travel is much easier to use, much easier to navigate, Littleton much more accessible, no stress. I have had experiences at our airport where I'm in the manual chair and I can't get to through security without someone pushing me. So I almost missed the plane because no one was pushing me through out of security. So I honestly think that out of all the airlines, I think the out-of-country ones are better. I think we're working on it, but there still can be improvements.
Yeah, a lot of room to improve on accessibility in transportation, with planes and even, public buses in the Cleveland area. We've seen some issues. Maggie, did you have a response for this question also?
I've never been outside the U.S., so I don't really know what it's like in other countries. But yeah, like she said, transportation can be difficult, especially because I get very overwhelmed in small spaces with loud noises. And I've only been on a plane a few times, but I don't enjoy it.
Is there anything that you think could be done in terms of accessibility to make that travel easier for you or someone like you?
Um, so I'm really not sure how that could be done. I feel like that's just a thing that you have to be ready for because it's not easy to just add more space or have everyone else be quiet. So that's just one of the things that is there.
Okay, thank you. Crystal, did we have any additional questions for this time?
Yes. So our next question is also from Dr. Musiel, and this is a general question. Says, has there been additional challenges you have faced during this current pandemic we are in?
Yes. Specifically for me at the hospital, my mom couldn't be there when I was in the hospital in March, and it was really difficult for me to advocate for myself because I was on so many medications I wasn't thinking clearly, and they were expecting me to make coherent decisions when I wasn't even capable of making coherent decisions at the time. And they didn't even look at my chart. They just wanted to get the information from me. That was the most frustrating thing.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Elizabeth. Thank you for sharing. Maggie, did you have any additional input on that?
Yeah, I did struggle quite a bit with the pandemic, especially near the beginning. Something that helps me a lot is with school, I have a schedule. Like I have to wake up at this time, I have to be ready by this time. And that really helps me just kind of get through the day and make sure I actually get stuff done. But once that wasn't happening, I no longer had that schedule, and it was really hard for me to do anything. And another thing was because it was harder to go out and like I couldn't really go to doctors, it was more difficult for me to get my medicine because I couldn't just go and get it refilled or I couldn't just go and get a prescription written.
Yeah, it has been very difficult. Jennifer, have you seen anything in your work in regards to the pandemic?
So my colleagues that still treat, they have seen a lot of challenges when it comes to the accessibility of internet and technological resources for their students because they're doing everything telehealth right now. So it's very difficult to make sure that the student has all that they need in order to get the treatment that they need.
Great, thank you. And we did have one additional question from, oh no, I seem to have lost it. So I had a question from Rick Penny that was in a private chat and I seem to have lost it. I can't find it. So Rick, if you could pose that question again in the chat to everyone, we can address it the next time we take audience questions. So for now, we're going to move on from conversations about perception to conversations about accessibility. So Elizabeth, we'll start back with you. What does accessibility mean to you?
Accessibility to me means there are cuts in the sidewalks for my wheelchair so I can get into the building. What are allowable accommodations? These questions are common for me. Accessibility means that I would have the opportunity to access the same things that my typical peers would have, such as employment, education, leisure activities, transportation, friends, just to name a few examples.
Yeah, accessibility can mean so many things. Maggie, we'll move to you. What does accessibility mean for you?
For me, it means the things that allow for people to everyone be able to reach the same goal without one person having to put in twice the effort so that because it's something that they can't control. So for me, it's things like having teachers check in on me just to make sure I'm aware of due dates and things like that, because that's something normal people don't have to worry about. But it's something that allows me to be able to function normally.
Yeah, and I like that you bring that up. That's something that we actually see commonly, where the burden of accessibility or accommodations is put onto the person with the disability. So in the instance of somebody who may be deaf and need an interpreter, it's usually on their shoulders to get that interpreter for, a doctor's appointment or something of that nature. So that's definitely some room to improve for the future. Jennifer, same question. What does accessibility mean to you?
Accessibility means that every tool, every space, and every piece of technology should be able to be accessed by all individuals, regardless of their ability. And there shouldn't have to be, like kind of like Maggie said, everyone should be getting the same type of treatment, throughout all areas of their life.
So, Elizabeth and Maggie, I'd like each of you to tell us briefly about a time when you faced a barrier to accessibility, and tell us, what do you think could have been done to change that experience for the better? Elizabeth?
I face day-to-day barriers, but when I travel, there are more significant barriers. I had the opportunity to travel to Italy. It was a fabulous trip. When I travel with a portable chair because it is easier. I cannot take that chair on the plane, so when I wheel up to the door, I must rely on the airline workers to lift me out of my chair, place me on the aisle chair, and lift me into the seat on the airplane. Let's just say these people don't always know what they are doing. My wheelchair then is supposed to be stored below where it can be retrieved after the flight so it can be taken off the plane so I can have it when I get off the plane. On a 20-minute flight from Detroit to Cleveland, when they retrieved my chair, it was destroyed. They broke the welds. It looked like a pretzel. Needless to say, I was unable to use the chair. Imagine if you got off the plane and someone destroyed your shoes. That's what it was like for me. It's important that we educate our airline staff at all levels to ensure that these kinds of issues don't happen again.
So, and you said you would suggest, an education or a training for professionals in that area to keep this from happening to other people.
It's happened to a lot of people, unfortunately. So the more training, the better.
The more training, the better. Absolutely. Maggie, can you tell us about a time when you faced a barrier to accessibility and what could have been done to make that a better experience?
So I was in third grade when I got diagnosed with ADHD, and at first, the school didn't want to acknowledge it, and my parents it was really hard for my parents to get me on the 504 plan because I had good grades and was quiet, so they didn't think I needed help. But it wasn't the grades that was the problem for me. It was the other things like focusing and just being able to have a good experience with school and actually learn stuff and not just memorize it for a test. And I feel like it would have helped if there was more education on what ADHD is and how to help with it, and it wasn't just seen as a fidgety leg issue and actually seen as how it is.
Thank you for sharing. Elizabeth, why do you think we need accessibility in a more general sense in terms of things like universal design. What ways do you think better accessibility would change your life?
We need things to be more accessible because it takes people with our disability twice as long to do many of the normal eating, transportation, using the restroom, just to name a few. Accessibility would help alleviate the time differential. Another reason we need accessibility is so that with people with disabilities can utilize what they have to offer and can contribute to society to allow us to have a voice in our own community. As more and more things become accessible, I'm able to live my life without thinking about but my abilities, opportunities, and goals allow that to happen.
Thank you. Maggie, what ways would increased accessibility change your life?
I would be able to do better in school, and when I'm older, eventually I would be able to be more successful in a career, and I wouldn't have to be as nervous when doing things like going out for like dinner or going to like a theme park with friends, which are two things that I struggle with a lot. And I'd just be able to do more of the things that most people are able to do without a problem.
Thank you. I'm just going to remind our attendees again, we will be taking questions again later in the session. So if you have questions as we come up, put it in the chat, select chat to everyone. That way, if someone has a similar question, then they'll see that it might have already been asked or they might want to add to it. Jennifer, we're going to turn to you. How long have you been in the field of occupational therapy, and what changes have you seen in accessibility over the course of that career?
So I have been an occupational therapy assistant for 5 years. And the different changes I've seen in accessibility is actually more to the classroom because my experience is in pediatrics. And I have noticed it is, I won't say easier to get accommodations in the classroom because that is not a true statement, as Maggie had already stated. But they're actually allowing the accommodations to happen. So if you're guaranteed more time on tests, or you can split a test in half, or you get extra time on assignments, I feel that there has been some education in some of our districts to those teachers that allow them to understand and willfully give those accommodations to their students.
So it sounds like there's been some improvement, but maybe we have a little more to go.
Oh yes, a lot more to go, I feel.
Great. So I'm going to turn that same question to Elizabeth and Maggie. Elizabeth, have you noticed any ways that accessibility has changed over your lifetime?
Many things are online now, so I have access to things I didn't used to. I can shop, I can visit with friends, I can do my banking. Although technology sometimes can be frustrating, it has opened many doors for me. Also, the Americans with Disabilities Act has allowed me the ability to use public transportation so I can go to college. It has given me the freedom to access higher education towards becoming a social worker. It has also given me the opportunity to have a job in the community. It has allowed me to travel and go on family vacations. It has given me the access to museums and cultural experiences. The Americans with Disabilities Act has made it possible for me to have so many adventures and more to come.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And excuse me, Maggie, have you noticed any changes in accessibility over your lifetime?
I haven't really noticed any changes in accessibility when it comes to me. I've noticed them in general, but with me, it's mostly just more people are learning more, and there's less false information being spread around, and it's just there's less of a like people are able to talk about it more without it being told to stop talking about it.
So definitely more receptivity and awareness.
Yeah.
Great. So we're going to take a pause for a moment, and I know we had a few questions come through. I will take some questions now and then again towards the end. So Crystal, can you share some of those questions for our panelists?
Of course. So this question is from Rick Penny, and this is a general question. As Lakeland students, are there technologies that you are aware of that we should be looking at to help?
Okay, does anyone, excuse me, does anybody want to take that question first? So Jennifer, you did say that you are an instructor at Lakeland, correct? Are there any technologies you can think of or that you've seen that support your students with disabilities?
Honestly, I think we're truly blessed at Lakeland to have the technology that we have. I'm in grad school right now, and I know that we do not have access to some of the technologies as a student. So I can't think of any right off the top of my head.
Zoom text, I know Lakeland has one computer with it, and I would actually find that computer, use it, and it saved my eyes from all the computer work.
You said there was a technology with the computer that helped.
It's Zoom text. That's
Zoom.
the technology. Zoom text. It enlarges the screen. So whatever I'm looking at, it makes it bigger.
Great. Okay. Yeah, and that would help with people like you or maybe anybody with low vision. I know we have some older students at Lakeland too. To that end, has WebEx right now, has that contributed substantially to your ability to access Lakeland programming?
That has helped in terms of not having to go out as much, but in terms of accessing Lakeland programming, it's very difficult for me. I actually, when there's presentations and stuff, I can't see the PowerPoint at all. I have to screenshot it and read it later or read it before class because it's too small.
Is there a way you would suggest that maybe we could make that more accessible for you and people like you?
I don't know if this is possible, but closed caption?
I know that some, excuse me, some like web applications like this, WebEx, Zoom, the other one's escaping my mind. I know some of those have started instituting automatic captioning, which isn't necessarily always the most accurate, but it definitely helps. It's definitely better than nothing. So Crystal, I do believe that there was an additional question in the chat.
Yes. So this question is from Dr. Musiel, and this is directed towards Jennifer. What is an example of an incident where you have to advocate for an accommodation for a student and were told it was not possible? Did you find a common ground that allowed the student a secondary means to information or a skill that maybe an educator had not thought of?
That's a great question. So in my experience as a pediatric occupational therapy assistant, a lot of my students were at the transition age between 14 and 21. So they actually had jobs that they would go to half the day. And some of the accommodations that we would give them would be some visuals that they would need to fulfill their job duties. So kind of giving them a visual schedule, or we would give them a job coach. And sometimes if there wasn't enough staffing, you'd really have to try to advocate for that student to make sure that they had the appropriate accommodations so that they could be independent in their job. Most of the time we were all kind of on the same page, and that was our goal. So I didn't necessarily have to fight too hard. We all kind of knew what they needed, but sometimes it was just a staffing issue. So we really couldn't get, the available staff for the child, for the adolescent.
Great question. Thank you. And thank you, Jennifer. So we're going to move on with some more questions. And I'm going to start back with Maggie. What do you think equity looks like for people with disabilities? So equity and equality.
I think it looks like making sure that they don't have to work harder to reach the same goal as someone without a disability, and not making them responsible for helping themselves.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth, same question. What do you think equity looks like for people with disabilities?
I think equity means for people with disabilities, we have the same opportunities as the non-disabled people have, and those opportunities are offered on an even playing field.
Okay, and Jennifer, same question for you. What do you think equity looks like?
I think that Maggie and Elizabeth did a great job of explaining that. It is just making sure that all the opportunities that are available to everybody, disabled or non-disabled, can be reached with doing the same amount of work.
Thank you. Maggie, what changes do you think can be made to improve accessibility and equity for future generations?
I think a big one is just information and knowing what people need and listening to them on their specific needs.
Elizabeth, what changes do you think can be made to improve accessibility and equity?
I understand individuals with the disabilities are not always different in the ways that matter. All people are ultimately unique. We all want similar things. The more people understand and know what to do, the more accessible and equal things will be. We need to start putting people with disabilities in the decision-making roles. It is important to have individuals with disabilities at the table when making decisions and discuss important decisions.
So really lifting up the voices of those people with disabilities and allowing them the agency to make their own decisions and weigh in on some of the changes that need to be made.
Yes, unfortunately, we don't have a big enough voice, and I think we should have a bigger one.
Thank you. And Jennifer, same question. What changes do you think can be made?
I think there needs to be more education, and us practitioners and advocates need to take the role of an active listener. I think we do need to listen to what individuals with disabilities are saying, because it's their needs and we need to be able to meet those needs. And if we're not listening, then we cannot do that.
So education is only effective if we're actually paying attention to it, it sounds like. Great. Maggie, in order to reach some of these goals that we've expressed, what do you think we can start doing today as a community, either in Lakeland's community or, the greater Northeast Ohio area?
I think that there should be taught in schools. Students should learn about different disabilities and how they can help people with them. Because a lot of the time, it's just they need extra help. I could do most things just with a little extra help. And also, just once again, spreading accurate information and working on getting rid of the misinformation that's out there.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth, same question. In order to reach some of those goals that we talked about, what can we start doing today?
We need to talk to someone with a disability, hire someone with a disability, date someone with a disability. Making a better world for people with disabilities begins with you. We cannot change the whole world at one time, but we can change our world by being compassionate, respectful, and open to people with differences.
Well said. Thank you, Elizabeth. And Jennifer, same question to you as well.
Well, I think what's happening right here is a great start. It's getting the conversation going. It's seeing what's affecting the individuals in our community, finding out, like Rick's question, asking what better technology can be given to our students with disabilities. I think it's just getting the conversation started, having, Elizabeth and Maggie at the table with us to make those decisions and to move forward as a community, especially as a Lakeland community.
Great stuff. Thank you. So before we move on to any final comments from our panelists, Crystal, do we have any more questions in the chat right now?
Yes, we have one more question. This is from a faculty member, Philip Boyle. So the question is for both Maggie and Elizabeth. How do you communicate with faculty about your accommodation? And how would you like faculty members to communicate with you about your accommodations?
A lot of that is private meetings after class during office hours. They're not afraid to give me the accommodations. They may ask why I need it, for some of them, but most of the time they don't have an issue with them.
And are you comfortable with faculty members asking you why you need a certain accommodation? Do you think that's appropriate?
Yeah, I do think that's appropriate.
So they should not be afraid to ask.
No.
Clarify that for them. So yeah, Maggie, same question. How do you communicate with your teachers about the accommodations that you need?
So I don't know what it's like normally, but for this year, it's an online Zoom meeting with someone from the staff. And one thing I've noticed with Lakeland compared to Riverside is that it's much easier to change my accommodations at Lakeland. They said I can do it whenever, but with Riverside, it seems to me there's a meeting once a year. Kind of like with Elizabeth said, there are some accommodations that I had at Riverside that I've asked to do at Lakeland. However, they said that it's not available for Lakeland. So that's one thing I noticed is not everything that helps me is actually available. But other than that, I think it works pretty well at Lakeland for me.
And you said, does it seem like your instructors at Lakeland, are pretty flexible where they can be?
Since I haven't done any in-person classes, I actually haven't had to worry about that.
Okay, well, we'll be interested to see how that changes once we're back on campus. And Crystal, I think I saw another question pop up in the chat.
Yes, there are two more questions so far. The first one is from Debbie L. Can there be a disabilities team developed for the college for better advocacy? Is there disability training available for the faculty?
So Jennifer, with you being on staff, is that a question you'd be willing to take?
Yes, I can take it. I don't believe there is an organization. I know we have an office where our students will go, and this is where they will get their accommodations. We do have training. At least I've taken some training as a new faculty member in the last couple of years. And I think that there's always room for improvement. I think that as a new faculty member, there's probably some things that I don't know about accessibility and accommodations that I probably should. As an occupational therapy assistant, I do know them because I've advocated for them for my student, but kind of having those two roles, I do think that there is some room for improvement in that area.
And I would be willing to offer training to the staff and disabilities and how to accommodate for people with disabilities.
Great. That would be a great offering for the community if we could set something up with that, with the Student Accommodation Center. Great. Any additional thoughts on that, Elizabeth or Maggie? Okay, Crystal, let's move on to the next audience question.
All right, the next question is from Dr. Heiner. So the question is for both Maggie and Elizabeth. What advice would you give a faculty member for working with a student with a disability like yours?
Okay, Elizabeth, do you have any suggestions for faculty members?
Be flexible. I get you. I get that faculty deals with a lot of classes, but the biggest thing is flexibility, I've noticed. And listening to what I need in my accommodations.
Great. Maggie, same question. Do you have any suggestions for faculty members on how to work with you on your accommodation needs?
Yeah, mine is listen to what my 504 plan says, but also if you notice me really struggling with something, like even if it's not on the 504 plan and it would help me, then it'd be nice if you did it. Because with ADHD, it can be difficult to diagnose. So I feel you don't just follow the 504 plan, because sometimes even if they don't have one, they could still have the disability and not know it. And just try to help people where they need it.
So really taking a more proactive approach, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, Crystal, did we have any additional questions in the chat?
Yes. So this is from Debbie L. And this question is general. How can we get this going? How can we get an advocacy group started?
So Jennifer, being on staff, are there any recommendations you have for that? Not to put you on the spot.
Well, we just need to get the people who think strongly about it to get together and start the conversation. I think that, if we have students who want to be advocates and then also students who want to be on the board because they have, they need the accommodations, those are kind of who we need to be present, on a group to start an advocacy board.
And I would be willing to participate in that.
I would as well, Elizabeth.
Right. Yeah. And Dr. Musial is raising her hand also. Yeah, it sounds like we do have some interest and some strong interest at that. So maybe we can start having those conversations about what a student advocacy group would look like, or maybe, disability education seminar similar to what we're doing today. Crystal, do we have any additional questions? We just got one more question for our panelists to wrap up after that.
Yes, so we have one more question. It's from Barry Artis. This is directed towards Elizabeth. Elizabeth, do you find the campus to be fairly accessible to you?
I find it's very accessible, but now with the elevators in the T building are probably the only area that's really hard to get to for me. So I avoid classes in T building because it's so hard to get to.
Elizabeth, and I believe you've mentioned previously, we had a few accessibility buttons on some of the entrances that aren't always operational. Was that right?
Yeah, they're not always working.
That might be a first point of action for our student advocacy group in the future. So, all right, we're going to move on now to our closing question for our panelists. Just are there any final words you'd like to share with our community? Maggie, we'll start with you. You've been nice and quiet. So are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with our campus community?
Yeah, I just think a big way that you can help right now is to just do some research. Find some people talking about their experiences, YouTube and Google. It's a great way to learn more about different disabilities and just try to help in the ways that you can and listen to people with disabilities first.
Great, thank you for that. I do know, even following some folks with disabilities on social media who talk about their experiences. I follow a couple of deaf creators and creators with Tourette's on TikTok, and it's been very educational for me personally. Sorry, go ahead, Maggie.
Social media is a really great way. I've actually learned a lot from social media about me. Even I, up until recently, didn't know much about ADHD, and through social media, I've learned what is caused by that and what's not. And it's really helped me actually to be able to improve, because now I know how to help these things that I didn't realize were part of my ADHD.
That's great. So Elizabeth, same question for you. Are there any final words you'd like to share with our campus community?
The first time we try anything, it is uncomfortable. Speaking in front of a large audience until you get used to it can be uncomfortable. Making changes can be uncomfortable. My disability does not hold me back because I am not afraid to make myself uncomfortable. I'm asking you to give yourself permission to be uncomfortable. Take a risk. Make friends with someone with a disability. I would love to see a world where everyone is treated fairly and with respect, where the beauty of a person is measured by their heart rather than their looks. We are and uniquely human.
Well said. Thank you, Elizabeth. Jennifer, same question. Any final words?
I think with all the things that we've done as a Lakeland community up till now have been great for accessibility and accommodations for our students, but I think that the bar continues to rise. And I think that we need to continue to try to meet that bar and get uncomfortable, like Elizabeth said, and really try to make those changes that we need as a community.
Thank you. Thank all of you for your time and for sharing your insight with us. Just a reminder for all of our attendees, as I mentioned before, we will be sending out a brief survey after the panel. So just, share some of your thoughts, anything that you've learned, maybe mention that student advocacy group if you'd like to be a part of that. We're looking forward to seeing what takeaways you have. And thank you also to our interpreter for being with us here from Cleveland Hearing and Speech. Christine, thank you for providing accessibility. So thanks to all of our attendees for joining us. And I think that's time. So have a great rest of your Friday.